أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واصبر فإن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام، وبعد. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Yesterday I mentioned at the beginning of the talk with regards to tabligh, one of the points I mentioned was to question, to gain clarifications from the sermons, the lectures that we hear, so that one, obviously in a respectful fashion with sincerity, we also take our preachers and our scholars to tasks in whichever position they may be, so that we understand better. We may have misunderstood something, something may not be clear to us, or in our questioning, they too might understand something, or it may clarify something for them. Maybe they've misunderstood, misread something. Maybe they didn't quite understand the verse of the Quran, or they misinterpreted it. This will only come to light by us discussing with one another. I also said that we should question so that we get clarification. I gained a few questions yesterday after the talk, for which I'm very grateful of. So today at the beginning I wish to answer these questions and then move into our discussion. The first was, if you remember, I mentioned the Holy Prophet says to businessmen and businesswomen, he says that I want you to take advantage of 5, or take 5 things and uphold them, and if you can't, then just don't do business at all. It seems that trade and halal transaction is hinged upon many things, of which the Prophet mentions these 5 in this particular tradition. And yesterday I mentioned one of them, which was to ensure that we do not hide the defects of something. And I give you the example of selling a commodity and not telling the person that yes, it's got battery life that is last you 12 hours or so, but give it a few years and this will deplete. If you don't make it clear what the defects are, then the Prophet says you're not doing justice to the individual you're selling to. Make it very clear for them. So to complete the hadith as per the question, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, Man ba'a washtara, whoever sells or buys must avoid 5 habits, or he should not sell or buy at all. The first one he mentions is usury, that you must not exploit a person or a people. When people are in need and you charge them interest, then you only exploit the individual's need. They've come to you for something because they're in need. Now, even according to Islamic law, there's a way to give a loan. There are certain etiquettes of agreeing a loan. Aside from the fact that you should write it down, even if you feel, according to some jurists, that if I give a loan today, this individual wants to pay back after 5 years, for example, then the value of the money that I'm giving him today will not be the value of the money in 5 years' time. But obvious, inflation, etc., doesn't tend to go the other way. You tend to lose money after a number of years. So how do I ensure that I don't lose out whilst I'm trying to assist somebody? Some people might give a soft loan, especially if it's a smaller amount, and they said that we can live with the fact that it may be of lesser value. Certain jurists allow you to peg it against something. You tell the individual, today I'm giving you the equivalent of 500 grams of gold or a kilo of gold. When you return back the money or the loan to me in 5 years' time, you do the same. Give me back the value of 500 grams of gold or a kilo of gold. Normally gold tends to be pegged very closely to fluctuation, not necessarily that it's on par, but close to it. What the Prophet's getting to here, it seems, is that when a people are in need, do not exploit the need. You saw what happened during COVID. When people were in need, all of a sudden prices could go up. You saw what happened just in the last couple of years, where you all paid petrol and diesel prices, and you only found that the companies who were supplying the fuel were only making more and more money. It wasn't that it became so expensive that they had to push up the prices to this extent, but this is what's happening, and this is what happens in a capitalist society. As soon as you see an opening and the ability for you to gain, it's very easy to pounce on that opportunity, become a vulture and a beast and an animal, and not care about the consequences on other people. The Prophet says that's not how a society becomes just. That's not how you help one another in society. Do not act upon usury and do not exploit one another's needs. Secondly, he says, do not make false oaths. Don't promise things that aren't true. Don't say, for example, I'll get, when you have competition in the marketplace. Somebody tells you, look, I need this and I need it for tomorrow. Are you able to get it? And you know that if you say no, then he's probably going to go to a competitor. But you want him to stay with you because you know there's further business that's going to come from this company. It's very easy to say, I guarantee I'll get it for you tomorrow, with absolutely no certainty that it's coming tomorrow, with absolutely no certainty that your supplier can provide it by tomorrow. But to make a false oath, the Prophet said, that's prohibited. What you're in actual fact doing is only lying to your own intellect, trying to deceive your own intellect. Your intellect has told you what's truth. It's filtered out right from wrong. It's saying you haven't even called your supplier. How can you commit? You say, no, I'm committing to it. I'm going to make a false oath. The Prophet says the second attribute, if you can't uphold it, simply don't do business. Number 3, hiding the defects of merchandise. We spoke about this yesterday and I touched upon it at the beginning. Number 4, praising what he sells, meaning overly praising something. Trying to make something sound much better than it actually is. When you go into a car showroom, somebody can overly praise that car. Somebody can tell you so much about it that you don't think there's nothing wrong in buying it now. He's gloated about it so much. But what happens? When you praise something so much, people lose trust in you. Because they realize as soon as they drive this car out of the showroom, 20% of its value is just gone. So don't overly praise it. Say the truth about something. Say what it can do. But don't try and make it sound much better than it actually is. Because it's only going to come back on you. And if people lose a trust in you, they're not just losing trust in you. You are an ambassador for your religion. If somebody loses trust in you, it's very easy for them to all of a sudden paintbrush every Muslim businessman with the same etiquette that they found you uphold. So be careful, because you're representing an entire religion. And finally, the Prophet says, showing disapproval for what you intend to buy. It tends to be an Indian tact of bargaining. That you walk into a shop and you really want this particular commodity, and he's not, or she's just not coming down and matching the price. It's very easy to say, okay, I'm leaving, I don't want it anymore. In the back of your head, you're just waiting for them to even breathe, and you'll turn around knowing that they're about to say your name and call you back in. Again, it's a good tact. It might work, but delve into it a bit more and you'll see that man is going against his intellect yet again. He's lying and deceiving himself, let alone the person opposite. That himself, he knows that I want this, it's an agreeable price, it's okay, yes, it's not the price I want, but still it's acceptable and affordable. For him to turn around and say, I don't want it anymore, he's just lied. Just say the truth. Say it's not the price I want it to be, and leave. And maybe he'll call you back and maybe he will come down. But for you and me to say, no, I don't want it anymore, I disapprove of it, it's actually not something that I need, and to walk out or try and walk out, that tact in actual fact is man lying to himself and deceiving himself. The problem is not that I deceive myself in one transaction. The problem is not that I lied or I hid defects in one transaction. The problem is that that becomes a root and a vice within me. And a businessman cannot say that I'll put on my head of usury and deceit only when I walk into business and I'll take it off when I come home. If a man becomes a man who lies, a man who deceives, a man who cheats, a woman who doesn't speak the truth, you think it's only inside the four walls of their business when they're writing emails there and when they're picking up phone calls then? No. It becomes one's habit and one's nature. Who are going to be the first subject of my lying and my deceit and my inability to hold my anger? Who's going to be the first subject? It's going to be my family at home. And the Prophet tells you and me that the best of you are the best to their family. That's the litmus test. How you are at home, that's your real and those are your true colors. Because outside, this could be a facade. This could be us just putting on a cloth and trying to make ourselves look good in front of one another. But the reality is, when I take off my garment, in the sense that now my true colors show I'm at home, I've let down my guard, that's my true personality. And that's why on the Day of Judgment, a man is asked in front of his wife, are you pleased with her? And she is asked in front of her husband, are you pleased with him? Because if they're not pleased with one another, or if the wife isn't pleased with the husband, then it doesn't matter whether or not his friends were pleased with him. That's secondary. Whether the community looked upon him and gloated and praised him and gave him a station and a status, that means nothing. If the people who are closest to you, if they are individuals who are fearful of coming home, don't want to spend time with you, then it tells you and me about our true characteristics. That's the hadith of the Prophet with regards to those 5 attributes, of which I touched upon one yesterday, the other 4 today. Another 3 questions that came through. Number 1, I'm going to read the question and paraphrase some parts of it. When God says He's going to test us, regarding yesterday's talk, with trials if we are a believer, then I get scared that if I'm living this life where I might not be tested a lot, what if hardships start pouring upon me? If I follow this path, how will I get through it? He continues and says, I know He tests if we are true believers, but in the end I'm a human being. I think positively about Him right now, but what if I stop thinking positive about Him if this path starts to get difficult? It's a good question, undoubtedly, that right now maybe I'm not really on the straight or narrow, or I'm trying to get closer to God, but I know the closer I get to Him, the heavier these tests and tribulations become. The Prophet, as you'll see in the Quran shortly, if Allah gives tawfiq, is that he had one of the greatest tests and he had to uphold some of the greatest patience because of the test that he was being put under. Amirul Mu'mineen wasn't tested intensely. Hussain ibn Ali alayhi salam wasn't tested intensely. 7th Imam in prison. 9th Imam prison. These were men, these were women who were tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intensely. The humiliation that Maryam alayhi salam had to bear when she came back with a child. The face of her aunt when she ran from the temple and went away, and she went to the safe haven and she saw her aunt, just the facial expression of her aunt seeing that she has now become pregnant, just the face without saying anything, seems to have brought such a broken heart to Maryam that she left and she went to the desert. Then the pangs of labor with no assistance, no apparent assistance, until she turns and she says, Ya laytani mittu qabla hadha wa kuntu nasyam mansiya. Oh God, if only I had died before this and I was a forgotten thing. She was tested, yet she was one of the purest of the pure women. You know the test that the Ahlul Bayt went through. It tells us the closer we get to God, the more difficult these tests become, the more intense they become. So, what if I'm going to fail the closer I get to God? Should I just stay a distance from Him? If I can ask whoever is the owner of this car to please try and move the car or go to the volunteers and hand your keys. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. believe the best way to answer this question is that the more one loves an individual, the less a burden becomes heavy. You know, when you used to be a child and your father needed help in the shop, and he used to tell you that you come and work with me on Saturdays. And as this teenage child, we never wanted to wake up. He would come to the room and he'd wake you up. He'll try and bribe you. He'll tell you he'll buy you lunch or you'll get a fiver at the end of the day. And still, he didn't entice me enough. Still, I wouldn't want, and when I went in a sluggish fashion to work. And I came back. That's because that love wasn't there. But this same individual, when he becomes a father or a mother, and the responsibility of earning for the family lies on their shoulders, without an alarm clock, they'll wake up at 6, forget 7. You'll never hear a complaint from their mouth. They will go not 5 hours, 12 hours, 18 hours to work sometimes a day. And they'll still come back with a smile on their face because of the love that they have for their family. The burdens become heavier, but the love has become more intense. And that's why Rumi, in one of his poems to God, he says to God, "Oh God, Ya Allah, when you tire of kisses, even insults will do from you. So long as it's coming from you, I don't mind. Because I love you, whatever you give me ease, I still love you. And you give me difficulty, I still love you. Why? Because it's coming from you. If the test is coming from you, then I know it has to be good for me. This isn't punishment. Punishment is when I've done wrong. Punishment is when I've been done evil and corrupted myself. That's punishment, and I don't want to change. That's why you punish. But this is a servant, yes, who has done wrong, but has started to change and has sought forgiveness. So now you just test. Tests are different to punishments. The answer therefore is, the closer you get to God. Right now that test might seem difficult, like the young boy saying, if someone told him you're going to have to go to work 18 hours, he'll never want to grow into an adult. But as soon as he grows into an adult, you see he wants to go and earn a halal livelihood. I emphasize halal livelihood because the Prophet says, ibadah is split into 10. He says 9 parts out of 10 of ibadah is in earning a halal livelihood. Earning a haram livelihood is easy. Cutting corners is easy. What's difficult is to stay on the straight and narrow. You remember that anecdote of that construction worker? He told his employer that this is now my last year and I'd like to retire now. So in the last year, the employer says, okay, we've got one more job on our hands. You complete it, you become the foreman, you finish this job, you build this house. He says to himself, it's the last house. If I was in my young days, then I knew that I'm going to have to find another job. If I make a mistake or take corners, or this employer is going to come after me and the warranty. He said, I'm going to quit after a year. Warranty, no warranty, he'll deal with it. So this one he sped up. And this one he cut corners. Superficially it looked good. You ever bought a new build? You find that the new builds are worse than those old houses that they used to make 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago, right? They used to build them out of brick and mortar. Now it's wooden plasterboard. So he goes in and he finishes the job. And then the employer comes after a year of, looking at the designs, this and that. He goes in. Now the employer just sees superficially. He sees the job has been complete. That man is ready to take his last breath in this company. Been given his pension, is ready to walk away. As he's walking out and they've got the farewell party, the employer says, I'd like to make an announcement. The announcement is, you got it already, right? So the announcement is that I'd like to hand the keys over to the foreman because this is a gift for him. This is what happens to you and me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants us to work hard. He wants us that we don't see these trials as difficult. We don't try and take these shortcuts. When it comes, the whole point was about halal income. When it comes to halal income, He wants us to strive hard to ensure we stay on the straight and narrow, and then He'll look after us. My grandmother used to tell me this hadith. She used to say, Ar-rizqu rizqan. It's from the Holy Prophet. He says, sustenance is of 2 types. One that you go out and seek, and one that will seek you. You sit in the four walls of the home, whether you like it or not, oxygen is coming to you. Whether you like it or not, when you open your eyes, you'll be able to see. For the majority of us will be able to see. That sustenance, the heart is pumping, the stomach is working, that's going to happen. But there's another sustenance that's allotted for you. It's got your name on it. You need to go out and seek it. And there's another sustenance with somebody else's name on it. You need to make sure you stay away from it. By you and me taking these shortcuts, by speeding up the amount of money that I can earn by gambling, for example, or by investing in stocks that I know are immoral and impermissible, it's a quick buck. But that was somebody else's. That wasn't allotted for you. Wasn't allotted for me. Wasn't allotted for the stomachs of my children either. So in conclusion, yes, the test will become difficult. Don't think about that now. If I think about the Prophet's test, I'll say I don't want to become anywhere close to the Prophet. No. As one becomes closer and Prophet-like, then obviously the patience and the capacity that he gains by Allah will also be Prophet-like. Second question, when you say don't be attached to people around you but then love them, how is it possible? Did Imam Hussain AliHussain not love his children? How is it possible to love but then not be attached? Why do we attach ourselves to something? In the negative fashion. You think Hussein was not attached to his children? Of course he was. He was a father. Sometimes we forget that these men and women were human beings as well. That the people in the Quran pointed fingers at them because they were so human. One of the taunts to the Prophet, one of the accusations against the Prophet in the Quran is that you walk in the market. They say, how come there aren't angels next to you? Why do you walk like us in the market? Why do you trade like us? Why do you speak like us? That's because they were human beings. You find individuals, certain sects, saying that we will get closer to God by staying away from eating certain foods, or meat, for example. Or we won't have relations with our spouse. We won't have children. That's animalistic. We'll stay away from it. The Prophet didn't do that. He was a holistic man, a true human being. He loved his wives. Some people say he only got married to this wife for political gain. I find it very difficult that a man who has impeccable morality would take under his guard another woman only for political gain. He has to have loved that woman as well. Every wife, whether they loved him or not is another question. But he has to have loved them. He has to be totally moral with them. The Prophet was a holistic man. Imam Hussein was they loved their children. But they loved their children because their children reminded them of God. That which reminds you of God, love it. But as soon as something has corrupted itself such that it's going astray and is taking you astray, at that point you need to detach. When Nuh alayhi salam, in the Quran, Allah tells him that we're going to save your family. As the flood begins, what's the one thing he turns to God? He says, oh God, what about my son? God, you promised my family. God, my son's on the other side of the mountain. Allah turns to Nuh and he says, oh Nuh, your son is not from your family and don't ask me that which you don't have knowledge of. It's quite harsh. He's harsh because the expectation of Nuh is obviously greater. That Nuh, as soon as he has corrupted himself and he no longer wants God and he's trying to divert other people away from God, at that point I want you to detach. Allah says this about parents in the Quran, that stand up firmly. I mentioned the verse to you. In justice, even against your parents. First he says, against yourselves. Awil walidain, O your parents, awil aqrabin, O your family members. Why? Because there comes a red line. That provided you're taking me to God, provided we're reminding each other of God, I'm attached to you for the sake of God. But as soon as you tell me to worship an idol, my attachment is no longer there. We detach at that point. God's priority comes before yours and mine. So love your children to the nth degree, provided you don't become attached. One of the litmus tests of being attached in the wrong fashion is that this spouse or this child makes me go against God. He didn't do anything wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. She might have just asked for something. He might have asked for something. But because of my attachment to them, I decided to take that step against God. I'll give you an example which is practical. A man who tells his wife that I don't like this dress that you're wearing, this dress code. I want you to loosen your hijab a bit. When we go out, all of my friends, all of their wives, look at how beautiful they look. When you see the makeup they put on, when you see how loose their hijab is, when you see how tight their clothes are, how come I get to look at them but I don't get to see my own wife? I want you to change your dress code. You know how many women have asked and they've said that I want to wear hijab but my husband doesn't allow it. That's entire principle skewed upside down, because the husband has no role here. A husband is to be a man who will protect you and take you closer to God. A wife is meant to be a woman who will protect you and take you closer to God. You are a garment for them, they are a garment for you. No sooner does the husband challenge God in God's command and say, I want you to show your hair, I want you to wear tight clothes, that speech of the husband has no value to it. It's like the husband telling the wife, don't pray today. Will she listen? Of course not. So why when it comes to hijab? But my marriage will suffer. What comes first? God or anything other than God? Even be it your marriage. You will try utmost to save this marriage. You can guide the husband. You can stand up and say respectfully. Nobody is saying that we have to go harshly and we have to be rude. We speak respectfully to each spouse. We make mistakes. We're fallible. I might ask something of my wife that is untoward. She might ask something from me which is ungodly. It's for us to discuss. So we love one another, we respect one another, we are attached to that which God has gifted to us, a godly attachment. But as soon as that attachment makes me say, you know what, I'll listen to him or listen to her even though it's going against God, that's the unhealthy attachment. Final question. It is asked, I want to learn Arabic to understand Quran. I don't know many Shia communities who might teach it. The whole of last year, just about every talk I gave, even at your community, I tried to emphasize the learning of Arabic. Inna nahnu naqussu alayka ahsan al-qasas bima awhayna ilayka hadha al-Quran. When it comes to Surah Yusuf, Allah is telling us that I've revealed this book to you in Arabic. It's got the best of stories inside it. He's chosen this language for a reason. I think to myself, my parents migrated from one continent to the other. They must have had tens of things on their minds. Maybe it wasn't possible for them to facilitate for themselves to learn Arabic. They had to ensure that I was brought up on the right path. They had challenges that never knew about. They didn't know what school environment is going to entail. There was so much that was hitting them because of the migration that maybe their concern was just ensuring that I was brought up such that I didn't fall into haram. The second generation or the first generation Muslim born here, our duty is much greater. Our life tends to be much more simpler in terms of complexities and difficulties than they had with migration. Many of us have never migrated. That comes with a great burden. Starting from zero, most of us never did that. One of the responsibilities I feel we have is to ensure our own children are given a step in life by learning the language of the Quran. It would burn me if my children, by the time they came of age, couldn't open the book of God and understand what God is saying to them. I would feel that I've done an injustice to them. I'll pay for the science tuition and the maths and everything else. Why? Because I see value in it. So where's the Arabic? Where's the Quran? Where's the ahadith? Why use a translation? You know very well that so much is lost in translation. Someone recites a marthia, they go home and they tell their parents that I didn't quite understand, and they come across a certain word and the mom and dad will say, well, it was in Urdu, but I can't give you the beauty of that single word. I have to try and translate it in a whole sentence, and even then I've missed part of the meaning. That's Urdu. What about the language that God has chosen? There's so much infused in it. It's wrong. Honestly, it's wrong that this community here allows it such that by the time the next generation takes over, at least many of them are not able to understand. Leave aside conversational Arabic. Just understand the supplications of the Imams, and more importantly, the Quran, because it's been revealed by God in a language chosen by God, which is above every other language, and that is the language of Arabic. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. I have 5 to 10 minutes remaining, so I will speak for a few minutes and then we'll speak about Masaib, and inshallah the rest of this discussion will continue tomorrow. I do thank those of you who have asked. I think they're very important questions, and I thank you and for giving me the opportunity to share the answers with others as well. Inshallah it's been of benefit. Yesterday we looked at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests and trials and throws down tribulations continuously. From the verse of Quran I told you, once a year, twice a year, it's continuous. It has to be there. If you and I live a life of ease, then we should start to question ourselves. Why does He test us? It's because He wants us and we want Him. One of the Imams, 7th or 9th Imam, they were in prison. And the prison guard says that every time he went to sajda, I heard this dua from him, where he says, Ilahi anta kama uhib, faj'alni kama tuhib. Allah, you're like that which I love, so make me that which you love. I want to be that human being. I want to be that Ali or that Muhammad, Allah, that you love. So do as you please to me. As soon as we say that to God, He has to then. He is duty bound. I've asked Him. He said in the Quran, Udu'uni astajib lakum. You call me, I'll answer you. God, I've called you. I've told you that I'm not able to become the great person I want to become. There's so many hurdles in my way. There's so much that I'm attached to. I'm finding it difficult to detach. Help me. As soon as I ask God for help, I've now put the ball in His side of the court. I say, you do what you want to me, God. Purify me. Take me closer to you. And the way in which He does that is by testing us through trials and tribulation to cut us off from everything that is in our heart which is ungodly. That's why He says in the Quran, Surah Al-Imran, وَلِيَبْتَلِيَ اللَّهُ مَا فِي صُدُورِكُمْ. Allah desires to test what's in your hearts. وَلِيُمَحِّصَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. He wants to wipe clean and erase things that you have within your hearts. He does that through tests. وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. Allah knows very well what's inside my heart. I might think, God, I'm not attached to wealth, but He'll test me with wealth. I might think I'm not attached to my spouse, but He'll test me with it. He knows what's in my heart. He knows what's diverting me from Him. So instead of trying to challenge Him, I tell Him, God, I love you. Now you do as you please to me, because I want to get closer to you. There's such a beautiful verse in Surah Al-Ra'd where Allah says that I'll only test you to your capacity. I mentioned that one verse in Surah Al-Baqarah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to us and tells us, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah only tests a soul according to its ability. But there's this verse in Surah Al-Ra'd where Allah talks about creation, and the implication is also man. He says, أنزل من السماء ماء. I send down rain from the skies. What did the Imam say in the hadith I mentioned yesterday? The trials and tribulation come down on a believer faster than the rain hits the earth. That's how quickly trials and tribulations come. Allah says, أنزل من السماء ماء. I send down rain from the skies. فَسَالَتْ أَوْدِيَةٌ بِقَدَرِهَا. And the valleys take the rain, and the rain flows in the valleys according to its capacity. Not more, not less. That a valley can only take so much rain. I'm not going to put more onto it. When He tests you and me, it's not because we can't go through it. It's because He's given us the tools and the abilities to get past it. Somebody passes away in my family, it's difficult. I've never experienced before somebody who's so close returning back to God. But He knows. He knows that I'm able to bear it. If something happens in business, it's because He knows that I can bear it. Our discussion has allowed us to conclude that one, God tests those whom He loves, and even when He punishes the ones who are running away from Him, He punishes through His mercy. عَذَابٌ مِّنَ الرَّحْمَةِ. He pulls somebody back. It might hurt them, but He's pulling them back because He doesn't want them to go into eternal damnation. Secondly, He'll only test according to our capacity and ability. Third, trials and tribulations must be regular. They'll be continuous. You will, at the Imam say, that rest is in the next life. That's where you'll sleep. That's where you enjoy. This life, مَا خُلِقْتُ لِلَّعِبِ. Imam says, I haven't been created to play. This life is meant to be difficult. The Imam say, Jannah is surrounded by trials and tribulations. You want to enter it, you have to go through this. He has to purify you. The Imam say, God will purify believers like gold is purified. With that heat, so that only pure gold drops from it. That's what He wants from you and me. Not a speck of the love of this world to be left within our hearts. Tomorrow, I want to discuss this particular characteristic. Have you noticed throughout our talks, whatever we've been concluding from the Quran, Allah is going to forgive us. He's a forgiving Lord. We're searching for Him right through the Quran. That's what the series is about. He's a forgiving Lord. He's a merciful Lord. All of this, He's a generous Lord. He's a just Lord. When I find a Lord with all these characteristics, am I realizing that what He wants is that now I too take on those characteristics? That's what He wants. I have found the perfect Creator, and the perfect Creator says that I want you too to become perfect as man can be. So He wants me to forgive. He wants me to be just and kind and merciful. What was He doing when I was rebelling and going against Him? He was being patient with me. He didn't remove my eyesight or paralyze my legs as I used them against Him. He was patient with me. So now, when I'm going through the cleansing process, I will have to be patient as well. Tomorrow, inshallah, our discussion will be on this name of God as-Sabur, the all-patient, asking ourselves, how does He want us to be patient? And what reward is there for those who have been patient?